events, and I know many of you are members, and we appreciate your membership. We appreciate all you're doing to support history, whether you're a member or not. And I have notes here. First of all, we want to thank the Holiday Inn for giving us the room and the refreshments that they're giving us today, gratis. They've been great partners to us over the last several years, as have other establishments in the community, but we want to thank Holiday Inn for this. We have a number of our trustees here. If you would raise your hands. I see Bruce Venter, Pat Niles, Larry Arnold, Todd Earl, Peter Werdeman, Bob Wilcox. I don't know if there's anyone else I missed. We have Dick Carlson, who is our manager of the Visitor Center, which will be reopening on May the 24th for the season. But you saw probably the handout on the table as you came in regarding our upcoming programs. I just want to point out a few things to you on there, because a couple of them are brand new, haven't even been on our website yet, which will be real interesting. I think most people here will want to attend. First of all, I'll highlight there are a few members-only events coming up, and we are having a meeting next week to define the dates of the first of those. That's a floating history tour, actually a tour on Lake George, taking the 3 spots in the southern basin of the lake. It will be over 2 hours long with expert narration and stops and things like that along the way. We'll get you those dates probably within the next, certainly within the next 10 days, hopefully next week. That's a members-only event. Another members-only event we will have, which is referenced on that handout, is a behind-the-scenes tour of Saratoga battlefield. Around the time of the battles of Saratoga, September, October timeframe. We'll have Larry Arnold, our trustee, who's a guide at the Saratoga National Battlefield, be able to take you kind of like and give you some of the ins and outs, what happened during those key battles, the turning point of the American Revolution. We have another one that Pat Niles will be leading, which will kind of give us some of the secret places, if you will, of the American Revolution within the region. Those are members-only events, so we hope that would encourage you to become a member if you're not already. But we have other events coming up which are open to the public. I think the next one will be on May the, I mentioned the Visitor Center opening on May 24th. Our weekly free tours of the park begin every Saturday at 11 o'clock, the following day, May the 25th, 11 o'clock. And then on Memorial Day, the 27th, we have our annual ceremony at the burial site of the 4 unknown soldiers. These individuals were killed at the Battle of Lake George in 1755 and reinterred in our park back in 1935. And we have a nice ceremony, about a 45-minute long ceremony every year. And this year, we're honored to have General Dave Shepard be our keynote speaker. He's a retired U.S. Army general, actually served and was shot down in Vietnam. So I think his heroism, personally, is unquestioned. We have Bruce Venter, one of our trustees, who is also a highly regarded historian, who's going to also be speaking about the Battle of Lake George and give context to that. The next thing I think we have listed is August the 8th, and that's a brand new event we're just announcing now. As I think everyone knows the name Colonel George Monroe. He was the commander of Fort William Henry during the siege and the loss of Fort William Henry to the British. The night of August the 8th, during the siege, the anniversary of the siege, we'll be hosting a guy named George Bray III, who's a very well-regarded historian from Western New York, reenactor, who's expert in that era of the French-Indian War. He's going to be speaking. It will be at Fort William Henry, and we'll encourage everyone to attend that. We have some other events coming up we want to make mention of. May the 11th, the Warren County Commission celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Revolution is sponsoring a presentation by Alexander Kane, who's the author of a book on Lexington and Concord. That will take place 11 o'clock, May the 11th, at the Masonic Lodge, Masonic Historic Center, whatever it's called.
Queensbury Masonic Historical Society.
Thank you. And tidbit, just see John Barrett or Stan Sinferano if you'd like to register or find out more about that. And we also have the premier America's History touring company doing a tour of Knox's extreme noble artillery train in the winter of 1775-76. It's going to be part one of a two-part tour. This year we'll go basically from Ticonderoga through Lake George, down south as far as Springfield, Mass. And next year's part two will be from Springfield, Mass, east to Boston. And I'm really looking forward to it. There's information out there on how you register for that as well. The big news, of course, among other things, is the state approved the reinterment of the 44 remains of Continental soldiers and others to be reinterred in our battlefield park. We expect that construction will begin hopefully in June and be ready certainly for the 250th anniversary celebrations in 2026, maybe sooner, but that was great news that the state finally approved that proposal of the remains that were found 5 years ago. There will also be remains, as I understand it, from that Fort William Henry possesses from the French Indian War that will similarly be reinterred at this site, and they'll be about 50 to 75 feet from where the current 4 unknown soldiers from the French Indian War are buried. So that will make for the design. If you saw today's poster, the design is very respectful, a nice place of contemplation with benches, with narratives to tell you the story of that part of the American Revolution, including the smallpox hospital that was at Lake George, which is the likely place where these individuals perished. And finally, and this is not public at all, but it looks very good. There is a proposal from Skidmore College's anthropology department to explore archaeologically Lake George Battlefield Park once again. I think everyone here probably knows that the late Dr. David Starbuck did, I think, 4 or 5 different explorations of the park from 2020, or from 2000 to 2016, if I'm not mistaken. This will be the first since his passing a few years ago. So we're very excited about that. That will take place in the month of June. When we have it approved by the State Museum, State DEC, we'll announce that publicly, and there will be times when people can participate in the explorations and certainly come and view what the Skidmore folks are doing. It'll take place over a 3 or 4 week period in June, and we'll have more definition of that soon. So a lot going on. It's a great time of year, obviously, when we can all come out and kind of go to a lot of history things. I know there's something going on at Fort William Henry today. A lot going on in Warren County, Washington County, Saratoga County, and elsewhere. So we history buffs can get our fill pretty soon, if we could ever get our fill, to get these programs under our belts. So that's the overview. Again, I want to welcome everyone and sincerely thank you. Our growth has been stupendous over the last few years because of your participation, your interest. So we thank you for that. And I'd like to turn it over to our trustee, Bob Wilcox, who will introduce our speaker.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Our presentation today will be on local hero Peter Gansevoort. And our featured speaker will be historian Michael P. Barrett, Vice President of the Board of Trustees of the Albany Rural Cemetery, where coincidentally General Gansevoort is buried. Michael earned a Bachelor in Science in Criminal Science at Russell Sage College while working as a police officer for the city of Troy, New York, and thereafter got a Juris Doctor degree from Western New England University School of Law in Springfield, Massachusetts. He recently retired as Executive Director of the Hudson Mohawk Industrial Gateway and the Hudson Iron Works Museum in Troy. In addition to his leadership role at Albany Rural Cemetery, Michael is currently a board member at the Lansingburg Historical Society. a past president and editor of the Brunswick Historical Society, a past chairman and editor of the Capital District Civil War Roundtable, a former member of the Board of Advisors of the New York State Military Heritage Museum, and a contributing author to the Encyclopedia of New York State and the Loomsack Review. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend, Michael Barrett.
Last time I heard that bio, a woman said to me, "You'll do anything to stay away from your family, won't you?" Yeah, okay. Good morning, boys and girls. Can I get away with this? You guys get... I'm a 19th century guy. This 21st century stuff just confuses the hell out of me. So lovely to be here. Today's lecture, of course, if you can read, Colonel, later General Peter Gansevoort. This is my first attempt at doing this, so if my pacing is off slightly, please forgive me. I was literally up until 11 o'clock last night finishing this PowerPoint, because did I mention I'm a 19th century kind of guy. Peter Gansevoort was born down in Albany on July 17th, 1749, to a local Albany brewer and lumber merchant named Harmon Gansevoort and his wife Magdalena Dow Gansevoort. The Gansevoort family presence here in the Hudson Valley predates 1660 and the takeover by the British in 1664, and he is related by marriage or blood to the Van Rensselaers, the Dows, the Fondas, the Van Skyke families, among others. Before his Revolutionary War service, Peter was affiliated with his father in various businesses in the Albany area. Of course, at the outbreak of the American Revolution, as most everywhere else when you have a civil war, and our revolution is a civil war, sides are drawn, families are divided. The Albany area was very much divided. The post-1664 English families tended, in general, to be more loyalist than the Dutch families because they had been conquered 110 years before, and they weren't particularly happy, and there was an awful lot of anti-Dutch prejudice at that point in time. I'll go off on one real short side note here. I spent 19 months in Alabama in 1973 and 74 with the Army. If I had a nickel for every time I heard the expression, "Oh, we didn't lose the war, it's halftime." Yes. Okay, oh, I'm with the Army of Occupation, and that would usually get a laugh. And, the family, the Gansevoort family, is very much loyalist across the board. Peter's younger brother, for anyone who studies this period, is probably very well known to you. He's extremely active in the Albany Committee on Correspondence, pre-Lexington and Concord, and after the fighting actually starts there at Lexington and Concord, he is elected to the Provincial Congress in November of 1775. Leonard rises to great prominence in a number of patriot political positions, including the Committee on Confiscations throughout the war, and post-Revolutionary War, he is elected to the New York State Assembly and then the New York State Senate. So again, the family is doing very well on our side through the war. Post-Lexington and Concord, Peter tells his father that he needs to leave the business. he unsuccessfully asks his uncle, his mother's brother, Volkert Dow, who is the vice president of the New York Provincial Congress, to obtain for Peter a New York State commission, but largely because of that anti-Dutch political hostility, he is not granted a commission. It prevents him from serving. He comes back to Albany. He is appointed a lieutenant in the local Albany militia unit, and as such, he participates very early on in the formative stages of the invasion of Canada, led at that time by Major General Philip Schuyler, last year's lecture up here for you guys. That is basically a two-pronged attack. We are firmly convinced that the French Canadians, who have only been under British rule since the end of the French and Indian War, they are going to come on the Patriot side and abandon the Brits and become, I don't know, the 14th state. How well did that work out? Bruce? Got an answer for me? Yeah. Anyway, oops. Okay. Schuyler and Montgomery are going to move up the Lake Champlain corridor, take Montreal, move off to the east, and help take Quebec. Benedict Arnold, who has already been instrumental in conquering or seizing Fort Ticonderoga, so that General Knox can take the gun tubes over to Boston and drive them out of that city. Arnold has come back. He's gotten permission from Washington to take a force up through the wilderness of Maine. And if you think Maine is wilderness now, you should have seen it back in 1775. But nonetheless, he gets there. The attack against Quebec on December the 31st, 1775 is an unmitigated disaster. I think I lost the bottom line here. But be that as it may, Peter Gansevoort has moved north with Schuyler. Schuyler gets up to the north end of Lake Champlain. He is ill. He gives command to General Montgomery. Montgomery takes that force all the way up, takes St. John, Chambly, Montreal, and then they head east toward Quebec. This is General Montgomery. While English by birth, he is also married into the Livingston family, Livingston Manor, Columbia County today. He's very successful. He's very much tied into the operations. Lieutenant Gansevoort is promoted to major in the 2nd New York Continental Forces. He is leading the men toward Quebec, but he is late in arriving. He does not get there in time for the assault against that city in December of 1775, but he is very instrumental in helping to maintain the siege of that city until General Burgoyne arrives in April of 1776 with 8,000 reinforcements from Britain. And so Gansevoort helps substantially in a successful retreat from Quebec back to Montreal. During that whole period, he is acting as an unofficial provost marshal, as we would know it today in the Army. He is basically in charge of preventing desertions. but he's spending a lot of time making sure that the troops are as well supplied as they can be in this logistical nightmare of moving thousands of men across hundreds of miles of wilderness without roads, without helicopters, without all those, deuce and a halves that we come to count on today. And he earns the respect of the troops for his work on making sure, while they may not be as well provided as they should be, he at least can explain to them why they are suffering as they are. And so he's helping to reduce that desertion rate. He is promoted, all right, here. This is, had this one. Benedict Arnold, of course, is half the attack on Quebec, General Montgomery. He is killed in action in the assault on New Year's Eve, 1775. Benedict Arnold is wounded in that same assault. He is, as it notes, the hero of the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, the invasion of Quebec where he is wounded. He is absolutely instrumental in stopping Sir Guy Carleton and his naval invasion of Lake Champlain in 1776. And he is huge in both the battles at Saratoga. This isn't a lecture about him, so I'm not going to go into an awful lot of detail, but as I jokingly said in this, not so jokingly, he would definitely be one of our greatest American heroes if he'd only had the terribly good sense to die of his second wounding at the Second Battle of Saratoga. I guarantee it, there'd be a state name for this guy. But you know the rest of that story, so yeah, anyway. But Peter is promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, largely based on recognition of the services that he has provided through 1775 and 76, first half of 76. In June of 76, he is given command of Fort George, right here at the south end of Lake George. I mean, half a mile from where we're standing, I'm standing, you're sitting. This is the main logistical center for supplying the Northern Department because we have, of course, lost control of Fort Ticonderoga. So Fort George here at Lake George is absolutely instrumental. It is here while serving and being, of course, a Dutch descendant and a Major General Philip Schuyler protege, he becomes an unwitting victim in the periphery of the great debate, the dispute. Horatio Gates, Granny Gates, as he is known in the Army, he is extremely desirous of supplanting Schuyler as the commander of the Northern Department. That is a stepping stone, in his opinion, toward him eventually replacing Washington as General-in-Chief of the Continental Forces. He is very much a political activist. He uses tremendous amounts of his energy sucking up to the Continental Congress and the various members. He is unsuccessful, but if you know your history or read your history, you will know, I mean, the man is a duplicitous SOB. But he's a high-ranking officer, so he's a duplicitous SOB, sir. And speaking of reading, most of you who've been to my lectures know I like to bring books so that you can, when I say, you know, if you have questions, I may be able to answer them at the tail end, but read. There's some excellent books over here. I'd like to thank Mark Silo in particular for providing a number of those for my research here. I tend to be Civil War, not Rev War, but they're feel free to take a look at them, copy them down. I mean, they're well worth the read. It's really an excellent selection of books. But anyway, getting back to the Gansevoort story, he is given nothing but grief by General Gates, who is up here just attempting his best to usurp Schuyler, and because Gansevoort is one of Schuyler's boys, he is just his life is made a living hell. The March of 1777, largely because of Schuyler's influence, he is promoted to full bird colonel of the 3rd New York Continental Forces. He is given command of the Western Division of the Northern Department. The Western Division is basically everything from Albany and Schenectady, out the Mohawk Valley, past Fort Stanwix, in today's Rome, New York, up to Fort Oswego at Lake Ontario. Colonel Gansevoort understands the fact that he does not have the manpower that will allow him to control this vast swath of land. And so, to a large degree, he abandons Oswego and moves back and establishes the western boundary for that frontier at Fort Stanwix. Now, Fort Stanwix is a French and Indian earthen fortification, earthen timber. It has been abandoned since the end of the war. It is really in derelict condition. He puts his men to work rebuilding that fortification, and that's going to be his line of stopping any invasion of New York State. And any thinking military strategist takes a look at maps and understands the fact that there really aren't an awful lot of readily available avenues of attack against upstate New York, if you will. You have the Lake Champlain corridor, you have the Mohawk River from west to east, you have the Hudson River from south to north, you have Massachusetts, which is a howling wilderness. So Massachusetts isn't a very good idea. We don't have roads worth a darn, so you need flat water avenues of transportation. That automatically gives you 3 of the 4, Lake Champlain south, Hudson River north, Mohawk to the west. And Fort Stanwix happens to be constructed, oops. Did I mention that my timing might be slightly off? This is also a guy who understands the concept. Burgoyne in 1776, 77 goes back to Britain and gets permission to have this 3-pronged attack. His theory is that if we can cut off New England, which is the hotbed of revolution, then the revolution will wither and die because the other states from New York to the south are going to resist revolution. They're going to come back to the king, because we all know the king is really nice to us. That's sarcasm. Thank you for laughing. Burgoyne is going to come down the water route from Lake Champlain to Albany. He sends Colonel Barry St. Leger out the St. Lawrence into Lake Ontario, where they come in at Fort Oswego. They are going to come down Wood Creek to Lake Oneida. They're going to cross, there's a 6-mile carry place between Lake Oneida and the Mohawk River, where it becomes navigable for rafts and barges that they would have available at that time. Certainly not ocean going in any sense, but And then they'll sweep in the Mohawk Valley, where they do believe that there is an awful lot of loyalist sympathy. What they're not paying attention to is Sir William Johnson, the famed Indian agent. He has died. His son John Johnson is running things in the Mohawk Valley. And in 1776, the Patriot forces have basically banished them from the Mohawk and sent them fleeing to Canada for safety. So they're not thinking they're done, but at the same time, an awful lot of the loyalist forces aren't there to support. So anyway, but the idea is they're going to come in the Mohawk Valley, they're going to meet in Albany, they're going to be behind Schuyler Gates, and they're going to sweep away the Patriot forces. And of course, General Howe is going to come up the river from New York City. That's a great idea until Howe, who outranks Burgoyne, is told that that's his part in this. Wait a minute, junior officer is telling me what I'm doing? Yeah, that's how that works. Yeah. So it's a two-pronged attack. But yeah, there's Barry St. Leger. Isn't he a dandy-looking fella? I gotta get me a hat like that. Here's an excellent, unfortunately, it's not quite as dark as I would have liked. This is showing very clearly the importance of Fort Stanwix. Here is the beginning of navigability of the Mohawk River. This is the road that comes up to Fort Stanwix, and it turns and goes off. This is the great carrying place that runs 6 miles over to Oneida. So you have flat water basically from Lake Ontario to the Mohawk River, except for the 6 miles, where you've got to have everything picked up and carried. So, I mean, it's a great location to stop anybody you don't want coming in that corridor. So it's crucial. It's crucial that it be held. And that, of course, is Peter Gansevoort's responsibility. Okay. Gansevoort is at Fort Stanwix. He has less than 500 men. He has supplies that are estimated to be about 3 weeks worth in July of 1777. He has the men building, he has them cleaning up, he has them fortifying. June the 26th of 1777, 2 of the soldiers have been sent out to chop wood. They are shot and scalped by native warriors. This is the opening guns of the western frontier, the third prong of the attack. The soldiers immediately move back into Fort Stanwix. They're very much afraid of the natives. The legends about how savage they are, of course, permeate the Continental forces. Everybody is quite concerned about what they're going to be facing, but just a few days later, on August the 1st, 250 Massachusetts troops arrive as reinforcements, and they are also carrying 6 weeks worth of supplies. Now, as they approach the fort, they are attacked piecemeal by natives. They come under a fairly heavy fire, but the vast majority of them get inside the fort, and they actually manage to bring in all of those supplies. So Gansevoort now has roughly 700 men, and he's got plenty of supplies. he can in fact sit out a siege. The Brits arrive the very next day. Thank you. The natives, of course, have been investing the fort, sniping, attacking anyone who goes outside the walls. But before they had done this, the Continental forces, following General Schuyler's lead from Whitehall down to the upper Hudson, across every rudimentary road and stream, they have chopped down trees and created these logistical nightmares. I mean, your roads are basically two rutted lanes, but when you've got miles and miles of tree trunks over that, you've got to hack them apart, you've got to pull them aside. It is really devastating to be able to have to get your supplies through a mess like this. And so Gansevoort has used exactly this. The 6 Mile carry place is filled with trees and debris that his men have cut down and put in the way of St. Leger's forces. St. Leger arrives on the 1st of August. He does not have his artillery or most of his supplies, which are being carried on carts, horse-drawn carts. It takes another week before that stuff gets to him because his troops are clearing this. So the first week of the siege is basically a whole bunch of Brits out in the woods looking at the fort, making threatening noises. Hey, surrender, because we're, no, I'm up on the wall. You know, what do you got, a musket? Yeah. So, now, here's one issue, and kind of I am considered to be the unofficial historian at Troy's Oakwood Cemetery. When I do cemetery tours there, when we do the Schwarthout family plot, very early Dutch family, before 1640, there has been a family legend for 200 plus years that Captain Abraham Schwarthout, inside Fort Stanwix, donates his second blue tunic to the ladies of the fort. One of the last dispatches to arrive in the fort is the fact that the Continental Congress has come up with a new national ensign. It's going to have a blue field with white stars. It's going to have 13 red and white stripes. The stars and stripes. The ladies decide they're going to make a national ensign. And according to family lore, the Schwarthouts say Abraham Schwarthout's tunic is cut up and made into the first flag to fly under enemy fire. Ooh, wonderful story. Emphasis, story. This is a marvelous book you can buy if you go to visit Fort Stanwix. John Luzader, who is one of the senior members out there, the very end of his report, The Stars and Stripes at Fort Stanwix, a summary of the evidence. I mean, historians may disagree. I don't know if you ever hang out with historians. I mean, they are more rock-headed than geologists are. Yes, today's Cheap Shock was brought to you by. But Luzader spends a lot of time looking at every written report about this. Chances are it's not the Stars and Stripes that you're thinking of as the Liberty flag with the 13 circular stars. It's probably the Cross of St. George with 13 red and white stripes. I will leave it for you to decide, but I will say my Oakwood tours, I don't give much credence to the Schwarthout view. But then again, have I mentioned Rockhead? Yeah, yeah. Anyway, okay. So it's a week later, August, when Leger's 8 small field pieces finally arrived. On August the 6th, General Nicola Herkimer of the Tryon County Militia has brought together the various militia units. He is marching towards Stanwix. He knows the Brits are out there. He is coming to their defense to help reinforce them. He is attacked and pretty badly beaten up at the Battle of Oriskany. Totally separate lecture. I mean, lovely, great place. If you are looking for a nice day trip, go out to Oriskany and Stanwix in Rome. I mean, it's just a good day. But they do manage to pretty much hold the field, but they are very badly bloodied. Herkimer is mortally wounded. They end up retreating. Barry St. Leger has assigned the attack against Herkimer to the Tories, who've come down as part of the expedition from Canada, and the natives. So their half of the encampments surrounding Fort Stanwix are basically vacant. And because they've gone 8 miles down the road to Oriskany to attack Herkimer. Barry St. Leger has his regulars. He is on the wrong side to watch 250 colonials under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Marinus Willett, as he leaves Fort Stanwix and goes out into the now undefended encampment of the natives and the Tories. They pillage and plunder. They seize all the food, all the ammunition. They get copies of the actual marching orders for the Brits. Oh, intelligence. I mean, always good to have. They move back into the fort. I mean, a nice expedition. Unfortunately, Herkimer doesn't think so, but the following morning, 3 British officers assigned by Leger under a white flag approach the fort. They are blindfolded, they are brought in. They meet with Gansevoort and Willett. They demand the immediate surrender of Fort Stanwix. They lie to Gansevoort, telling him that Burgoyne has already taken Albany. He's still up in Fort Ed. But, oh yeah, Burgoyne has already captured Albany. You have nowhere to retreat to. So, and we should also mention, our native allies are furious about what you did yesterday. And if you don't surrender immediately, we don't think we're going to be able to control them as they rampage through the Mohawk Valley, and your women and your children and your farms are not secure. You really ought to give this up. And Lieutenant Colonel Willett, gotta love this. Gansevoort hasn't spoken a lot through this meeting, according to all the accounts, because his English is very heavily Dutch accented. And of course, the Brits and the Dutch have had 3 wars now over the last 100 years, so they're not getting along too well. And, so he doesn't want to come across as being too Dutch. So he lets Willett be the lead man in the negotiation. And Willett answers, and this is a quote, "It is disgusting for any British officer to send such, and completely disreputable for a British officer to carry such a threat." Close quote. We're going to unleash the savages. The 3 officers, hugely embarrassed, end up leaving. Gansevoort sends a message saying he is determined to defend the fort to the last extremity. The following day, Barry St. Leger sends another message with a different officer, laying all responsibility for this untoward suggestion of native revenge on his native allies. I had no choice but to send the threat. Yeah, okay. We're hanging on to that. Gansevoort sends another message out saying, that's cool, but we intend to hold this to the last extremity. The next 20 days, the Brits, following normal siege procedures, they begin digging trenches and sideline trenches. They're moving forward. They're shelling with the 8 small field pieces to keep the colonials down, to keep them from shooting at the work parties. But once you get too close, all the work is done at nighttime. But in the morning, you know, the Patriots are looking out and they're seeing how close the Brits are coming. The idea is eventually they're going to have all 8 field pieces so close, you pick one spot where you can aim, because if you've ever seen these cannons, you don't aim them. Yeah, somewhere over there. Yeah. But if you're close enough, you can aim at one spot and make a breach, and then, you know, the Brits will charge in and win the fort with hand-to-hand fighting. But this is the point where word reaches Barry St. Leger and his forces that there is a large reinforcement contingent on its way under the command of Benedict Arnold. I mean, imagine he'd be a great hero. This is the famous story. I don't know if you guys know this. Han Joost Schuyler, relative of General Schuyler, but he is from the loyalist side of the family. He has been captured. He's going to be executed. His mother basically goes to Philip Schuyler and says, oh, please don't do this, don't do this. Well, Han is a bit of a half-wit, all the accounts say. And so they decide, because he has had travels out through the Mohawk Valley, and the natives know that he is special. He's apparently touched by the Great Spirit. So, I mean, they leave him alone. Okay. What they do, they take Han's tunic, they shoot holes through it, they put it back on him, and they send him out to the natives who are with Barry St. Leger. And he talks about this huge number of men who are coming to fight you, and well, how many are coming? And he points at the trees. As many as the leaves on the trees. And you have bullet holes through your tunic, and yet you have no wounds. Oh, it's the Great Spirit warning us. And the natives pack up and go away. I mean, it's reported everywhere, so I have to assume there's some truth to it, but it's just, yeah, the natives basically say, we're out of here. And there are a couple of other people who come out and give them the same information, so it's not just one wackaboo who's saying this, but Barry St. Leger basically has no choice. He's lost all of his eyes and ears. He's lost a good-sized chunk of his fighting force. He packs up and he leaves. Arnold arrives at Fort Stanwix. Gansevoort is inside saying, I don't know what happened. Yesterday, they were all out here. You couldn't lift your head above the parapet without getting shot. And now there doesn't seem to be anything there. So Arnold says, okay, well, lay down a barrage, fire into the trenches, see if anybody answers. Nobody answers. They send out scouting parties, and the trenches are gone. The camp is abandoned. Oh. Gansevoort says, I'm not sending men after them, because we know what happens. They set ambushes. We just saw Oriskany. Okay, and Barry St. Leger goes away, and the Mohawk Valley is secure. Now, we've lost some casualties, not a huge number. The Brits and their allies suffer much more than the Patriot forces, but nonetheless, Fort Stanwix is saved. And so is the Mohawk Valley. Okay. Peter Gansevoort, of course, earns the nickname, the hero of Fort Stanwix. John Allen, writing to his wife, says, I can't believe it, but Gansevoort has proven that we can hold forts. I mean, you know, George Washington has the idea we don't stay in fortifications, we move, we stay mobile, you know, we hit them where they don't think we're gonna be, which there's a pretty good rationale for that, but be that as it may. But bottom line, many historians consider the twin victories of midsummer of 1777, the victory at Fort Stanwix, which totally obliterates the western prong of the three prongs, and the victory at Wollemzak. Some of you know it as Bennington. I'm from Rensselaer County. It's Wollemzak. Where Burgoyne basically loses 10% of his fighting effectives at the Battle of Wollemzak-Bennington. Stanwix and Bennington is basically the death knell for Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne. He doesn't know that. He may know it, but he's too stupid to decide to go home and recoup. Gansevoort turns over command of the fort to Lieutenant Colonel Willett. He returns to Albany. He has been having health issues. I don't know if I mentioned during the 1775 campaign, right after taking Chambly on the St. John River, he contracts what appears to be typhus. The military camps are absolutely filthy. Nobody's paying any attention to this. He is reported to his family to be dead. His brother is planning on heading up to Canada to recover his body when word reaches him that, oh, Peter's not dead, he's just real sick. So he ends up getting it again. He goes back in 77, late 77 to Albany. In early 1778, he marries Catherine Catty Van Skyke of the Van Skyke Mansion in Cohoes, for those of you who know the proper area of the upper Hudson Valley. Another cheap shot. They produced 6 children, 5 of whom lived to adulthood. In 1779, 1780, he is instrumental in assisting in what are known as the Sullivan-Clinton campaigns against the Iroquois tribes that have allied themselves. The Oneida are with the Patriot forces. The other 5 tribes have all taken the British side. He is involved in all of this. The campaign destroys over 40 Iroquois villages in western New York and northern Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, because of the lack of postal services, Peter doesn't write any letters because nobody's going to take them to Caddy. So we don't have an awful lot of records about what exactly he did. We know the campaign they did, and he's mentioned in some of the reports, but not much. But anyway, this is pretty much what he does. The spring of 1780, he has the 3rd episode of the disease, typhus, whatever. He returns to Albany to recover. In spring of 1781, he is appointed to be Brigadier General of the New York State Militia. He commands the Albany County Department. He serves in that position until 1809. In 1809, he is given a United States Army commission as Brigadier General in the official army. commanding the Northern Department, which of course had been set up originally for his mentor, General Philip Schuyler. Here's the very famous painting we were talking about earlier. This is Gilbert Stuart. Apparently there's a copy in the freshman dining hall at Harvard. Okay, that's gonna take a little research. Don't understand that one at all. But he's very well respected. He continues to serve in his active military command. He is also made the Commissioner of Indian Affairs for the Mohawk Valley, starting in 1788 and serving until 1791, which must have been a little awkward. I mean, here he is, part of the campaign that destroys 40 Iroquois villages, and now all of a sudden he's the Indian Commissioner. Okay, that's not a conflict of interest. He's Sheriff of Albany County from 1790 to 1792. He is a regent of the University of New York. He is a 15-year member of the board of the New York State Bank, the first commercial bank in upstate, outside of New York City. And in 1800, he is an unsuccessful candidate for election to the United States Senate. Between 1793 and, this is what I added at 11 o'clock last night. Oh, there's a monument. This is a sculpture of the general. It used to be called, I believe, Echo Park, but in 1907 they renamed it Gansevoort Park and erected this really lovely sculpture to Colonel at the time, later Brigadier General, out there in Rome, right in the heart of downtown Rome. That City Hall behind it, the county courthouse is there, I mean, a couple of others. But between 1783 and 1792, he ended up purchasing a number of plots of land that had been confiscated from the Tory royalists. He started off with about 1,000 acres, went to 1,500, all along the Schnook-Kill Creek, which has some pretty powerful hydropower locations. Eventually, his holdings reached up close to 2,500 acres. He establishes a lumber mill, a grist mill, a fulling mill, and there is a small community even today that exists around that water-powered industrial site known as the hamlet of Gansevoort. We have some Gansevoortians here, if that's the term. There is a very nice house in Gansevoort that was built the year after the general died by his son Herman. That's actually apparently now a B&B. So if you don't want to drive all the way home, you can stop at exit 15 and spend the night in Herman Gansevoort's house. Folks here inform me, I was under the impression that the general's house in the hamlet was gone, and I'm told they know the people who own it. Okay, he's wearing a black jacket and gray slacks. Yes, it's okay, don't call police, because he's just weird. Yeah. But yes, so I'm paying a visit to Gansevoort because, anyway. Among the last things in the general's career, military career, in 1811, he presides at the court-martial of General James Wilkinson, alleged but acquitted of being a co-conspirator to Aaron Burr and proven a number of years later to be an active spy for the Spanish government. Yeah, okay. While serving as Brigadier General for the Northern Department at the outbreak of the War of 1812, the general is very much involved in making plans for what we all assume will be the successful next invasion of Canada. Didn't work out too well. He ends up succumbing to a 6-month-long bout of respiratory illnesses, which are probably related to his wartime illnesses. He dies on July the 2nd of 1812. He is 15 days short of his 63rd birthday. He is 2 years shy of seeing his younger daughter marry a man named Alan Melville, a merchant in Albany and New York City. Getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I want to touch here. These are the grave sites, the grave site of General Gansevoort in Albany Rural Cemetery. You saw the image of the dedication of the monument in 1901. We do not know who these people are. This is a photo in the Albany Rural Cemetery collection. Unfortunately, they're all unidentified. So, feel free to make up your own story. Here's the general's grave as it looks actually Tuesday afternoon. This is a plaque that the Peter Gansevoort chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution installed at a ceremony we held in the cemetery last summer. Immediately to the right, flush to the ground, that is the original joint headstone of Peter's father and mother. They were buried in the State Street Burial Ground, now part of Washington Park in Albany. When they were moving all those bodies, there's an entire section at Albany Rural that has all of the 300 and some burials that were moved. They didn't take the headstones. So, I mean, there's this great big open field, and everybody says, well, why aren't you selling these lots? Because there's 300 people in there. Gansevoort's parents needs a good cleaning, but they're right there behind him. Here's a close-up of the inscription to the memory of Peter Gansevoort Jr. His father is Herman. Okay. I wasn't there in 1901.
They used to do that.
I was really young. Yeah. So, who died? Served under Montgomery. 77 defended Fort Stanwix against St. Leger, and active command at the beginning of 1812. Here's Stanwix chief and brave defender sleeps. And here, I mentioned, the general's youngest daughter, Maria Melville, married Alan Melville. Alan died fairly early, leaving Maria and her 4 kids rather destitute. They lived in the house that's right next to McGeary's on North Pearl Street in Albany. Today, the house still stands, has a very nice plaque on it, but she couldn't afford the rent for that unit, and her cousin, who owned a house in Lansingburg, the north end of today's Troy, had a flat that was available, and so she moved in there with her 3 children, her son Herman, sits, we know which room was his. I'm a member of Lansingburg Historical. You can actually go up on our open houses. The tenant who has the second floor allows us to bring people in, and you can sit in the window where Herman would look out across the street at the shipyard and the Hudson River behind it. And from there, he left on his first ocean voyage to Britain, and then comes back and decided he wanted to do a whaling voyage and leaves for 3 years. But that's the training, if you will, the experience that enables him when he comes home and moves back in with Mom. He writes his first 2 novels sitting at a desk in the window, Typee and Omu, which were a huge success. He ends up moving to New York. He buys a place over in Massachusetts, Arrowhead, and of course later he writes his famous magnum opus, Moby Dick. We say this all the time in the museum. If you're going to read Moby Dick, I strongly suggest you get an edited version. If you have insomnia issues, chapters 18 through 25 will cure that in a heartbeat. I mean, there's a lot of good content, but sweet Jesus, he goes into minute detail about whales. Yes, and so, on that note, yes, here is our legacy. General Gansevoort passing through his children, his grandchildren. Oh, and the Melville House, the Gansevoort house in the hamlet of Gansevoort. That's where almost all of the family, including Herman, summered in the nice, in that period. So, yep. And on that note, thank you very much. Are there questions, comments, or concerns?
Why don't we start on this side first? If there's any questions or comments on this side, raise your hand. Go ahead, Jim.
Did you say he had contracted typhus or typhoid?
Typhoid is probably, yes, what it was. Lack of sanitation and, yep. If I said typhus, I'm sorry. I got drunk this morning. That's a lie. I've been drunk in 35 years.
Anyone else on this side? No? Okay, over here,
John.
John.
Just thank you, Michael. Excellent presentation. Given our knowledge of Gansevoort, what would you say from the cemetery's perspective, the level of interest in Peter Gansevoort, versus folks Silas Day or other noteworthy people who are in the cemetery?
Minor. That's the super short version. I was up there Tuesday, as I said, shooting pictures. There were 4 people who came by walking their dogs, and we were kind of chatting, and I said, yeah, I'm here to shoot pictures of General Gansevoort's stone, and I mean, all 4 of them went, who? Is he named for the hamlet? No. And so I started explaining this and telling them who he is and why he's important. And I mean, there are 4 people, I guess they're in their 50s, 60s, and they're looking like, what? Why would he be here? Excuse me, we have a president of the United States who's a half a mile away. We've got 4 governors of the state of New York. We've got Supreme Court justices. We've got, really? You're just dead people. Yes. And that's why I'm here. Because me and famous dead people get along really well. But, I mean, nobody grasps it. Terry's not here, is she? I mean, they did a very nice ceremony last year, putting in that plaque, which was well attended. I was actually kind of shocked at how many people, although most of them were members of the Peter Gansevoort chapter of the DAR. You know,
No family
yeah.
members?
I'm sorry?
No family members?
No, no. My understanding is there are almost none of them left in the area. But
What section is he buried in, Mike, if I can ask?
if I remember correctly, it's number 55.
You know, here, yes, ma'am.
I just have a question then, why did Stanwix, that whole victory, fall into obscurity? Was it Gates promoting what he claimed he did at Saratoga?
Pretty much so,
He
yes.
said he moved the man enough already, and also, I wouldn't put it past him to parlay that anti-Dutch sentiment in his debasement of Schuyler.
Yes. Gates was extremely prejudiced from everything I've read about. I mean, he was anti-Dutch, he was anti-French, he hated everybody. Well, matter of fact, he hated most of the Americans. There's a funny story, and it is true. His first report of the Second Battle of Saratoga was sent to the Continental Congress by an officer named Wilkinson, and he gets to Philadelphia, and I mean, here he's got this hugely important dispatch about the great victory, and it appears that the Brits are gonna surrender, and he spends 48 hours taking care of his own personal business before he reports to the Congress. Oh, you're not important. It's like, Gates is livid, because Gates's report is basically me. I did this, I think I fired every shot. Yeah. I killed every one of the, and Wilkinson treats it with complete disdain. But, so, I'm sure that, yes, you're absolutely correct. It was largely Gates just writes off everything that didn't involve him. And of course, he fought so hard with Arnold between the first and second battles that, if Arnold was involved in rescuing, if you will, Stanwix, we can't mention that at all.
Thank you, it was a great talk, I knew very little about this, and now I can't wait to report.
And half of it's true.
All legends have their origin in.
Oh, yes. And, yeah, well, as I was saying
Also,
about,
we follow the folklore because there's
the whole Stars and Stripes under fire for the first time thing. I mean, I've repeated that story in Oakwood Cemetery for 40 years. And it wasn't until really seeing the reports from the people at Stanwix that said, we don't think that's true. Oh, crap. It's bad enough when I have to tell people that I'm the best looking man in the room. I am, as long as I'm
And that's half true.
That's half true, yes.
Gainsborough, he didn't leave much in the way of papers, I assume that contributes to his obscurity.
That's certainly part of it. I did a very quick search for his papers. The Albany Institute of History and Art has, I think their account says 16 pages. I mean, right. You look at General Wall, he's got 32 boxes right. He apparently either didn't write an awful lot, or on his death, they burned his papers. I mean, I hate to say it, but that seems to be fairly common.
I disagree with that. There's a large collection down at the State Library. and there's a-
Gansevoort?
Yes, and there's a book called The Hero of Fort Stanwix, that was published by, I think it's McFarland, and it, you know, they have all his letters. It's a book just of his letters that these two fellas edited. So, no, there are letters for Gansevoort. Yeah. And they didn't even print all the letters, because the one fella sent me all the letters for 1778 that weren't in the book, so get on Amazon this afternoon.
I have a lunch date and a dinner date. Can I wait until tomorrow? Thank you, Dr. Bruce.
Were one of the failures of the three-pronged plan that Howe wanted to go to Philadelphia
Yes.
instead? He didn't follow through.
He did. He left Clinton in charge in New York, and Clinton didn't have anywhere near the manpower to come north. And although he did eventually come up and burn Kingston, Esopus back then, but yes. Howe was not happy about being told he was going to support a junior officer's plan. Yeah.
Ego got in the way.
Far more often than, yes, if you read military history, yeah, ego is a huge amount of this. Yes, I'm in charge.
Yeah. On another note, you talked about people knowing what Gansevoort is. I know sometimes when I like, for example, on a phone calling to order something, and you give the address, and they go, Gansevoort, what, you know, how to spell it, all this and that. I said, well, do you know who Peter Gansevoort was? And nobody ever knows.
Nope. Yes, ma'am.
I was at a meeting a week or so ago in Saratoga, a historical meeting, and the person I was talking to said, Gansevoort? Is he named for the town? And I looked at her, I said, you are an historian in Saratoga County, but she was from the other side of Saratoga County.
There you go.
The wilderness side, yes.
She was from Boston Spa.
Otherwise known as Ballstown Spay.
Yeah.
Yes, I thank you for this. I didn't know how many different places Willett was, because I had 6 ancestors that fought under him
Ooh,
from the 3rd Regiment, 13th Regiment of Albany. And I have been looking for them, and it gives me another way to go.
Sir?
I was just gonna say, that people don't realize all the connections between the upper echelons of the Dutch in the valley, including Herkimer. Herkimer,
Oh,
the Tylers in
yes.
Barrett,
Yep.
4 times. And it's just amazing, you know?
Any others? Okay, I guess that's it.
okay, yes,
Thank
we're
you.
getting